Well, welcome. Thanks for joining us. First session of the day for some of us. Some of us got up early and had some breakfast with the veterans, and I'm really excited to have everybody here. This is one of the highlights of my year. This topic is something that every morning I get up and drives me for my day and my year, and as some of us were talking for many years. And the reason that it does is because it's really about public health. Some of you may know me. Nicole Taylor-Smith. I'm Vice President of Regulatory Science and Policy at Philips. I am also a former regulator and have sat in the seats of these amazing people and wake up every day in service of patients. And this topic is specifically important to me because it's about access. If we don't get this right, if we don't partner together across the globe, then especially those jurisdictions that have small markets, if it becomes too burdensome, those patients don't get products. And it's not just about innovative products, it's products at all. And we have to work together to make sure that doesn't happen. And so for me, it's about public health. It's not just about market access and getting products around the world. It's really in service of patients. So I hope you keep that in mind today as we talk. And that's why we're all motivated to work together, because it really is about making sure people get those life-sustaining, life-saving products. So to kick it off today, I'm going to ask everybody to introduce themselves. I'm going to start with you, Melissa. We all can see you and hear you, and welcome for you to introduce yourself first.
Thanks, Nicole. I'm Melissa Torres. I'm the Associate Director for International Affairs at CDRH. I'm one of the Management Committee representatives for US FDA at IMDRF. My apologies for not being there in person. I recently had ankle surgery, and getting around is not the easiest for me, so traveling has been quite difficult. But hopefully next year we'll be able to see everybody again in person. Thanks, Nicole.
Thank you, Nicole. Hi. Well, my name is Augusto Gaia. I'm the head of Medical Devices Office in Brazil, the Brazilian Health Regulatory Agency. So we are the ones responsible for the registration for the market in Brazil.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Sally Prodzik. I'm the Acting Director for the Bureau of Policy and International Programs at Health Canada. And as Nicole mentioned, she was previously in this seat. I was previously more so in her seat. I spent much of my career in industry. I've now been with Health Canada for about 4 years.
My name is Madoka Murakami from PMDA Japan. I'm a principal reviewer for software as a medical devices. I've been in charge of international activities for 15 years. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Laura Squire. I am the Chief Healthcare Quality and Access Officer for the MHRA in the UK, and delighted to be here with a number of colleagues. At the moment, I am leading the MedTech regulatory reform for the UK.
As you can see, we have a very distinguished panel today, some really great experts, and I'm so excited about the conversation. So let me give you a little bit of an update of what we're going to do today. Everyone here has prepared a short presentation to kind of give you an update of what's going on in each of their jurisdictions with respect to global harmonization, reliance, convergence. Many of them are leaders in this space, and so it's exciting to hear what they have to say. And then we're going to have a little panel discussion, some questions and answers, and then we're going to open it up for all of you to ask questions. So think about your questions as we go through. We want to have a lively discussion. We want this to be an open dialogue, and so we welcome all of those questions. So without further ado, because I know our time is tight and we have a lot to get through, I'm going to pass it over to Melissa Torres at US FDA to do our first update.
Thanks, Nicole. I can't see the slides, so I assume someone will advance them for me.
Yes, that's right.
Okay. So on the first slide, so we know there are a lot of challenges with international harmonization activities. We know each country, we have to really develop and implement our own regulatory framework and really a pathway how to market products based on those applicable statutory requirements. In particular, it's become even more challenging when we start talking about emerging technologies such as AI and digital health aspects. Ultimately, when this happens and we all start creating different types of requirements based on our own frameworks, we know that resources are not maximized when we have to administer, and industry is going to have to navigate through various, numerous types of sometimes redundant or even conflicting requirements globally. If we can really focus our efforts on harmonization, convergence, and reliance, we can ultimately promote a more effective regulatory model for medical devices. Next slide. So we know there's a number of benefits, and I'm just starting with some general overviews, and I'll talk about what we are doing specifically at FDA. We know there's benefits for harmonization. We can accelerate the access to safe and effective medical devices. We can avoid things like technical barriers to trade and redundant work. It allows manufacturers to be able to streamline their processes and deliver products faster to the patients. Also, it helps stimulate innovation and elevates our regulatory frameworks, and ultimately would create a more efficient and effective model, meaning that patients can have access to safe, effective, and high-quality medical devices. Next slide. So from a CDRH approach, we certainly collaborate in a number of types of efforts with our regulatory authority partners globally, whether it's through multilateral efforts or bilateral efforts. And I've listed here just some examples of different types of organizations or projects that we are involved in. Of course, IMDRF is our #1 priority from a US FDA perspective, and next year we'll be actually the chair of IMDRF. MDSAP has been a core foundational program that we've participated since the inception of the program. We also have programs like Harmonization by Doing with Japan that's been in place for many years, working on clinical trial aspects and pre-market aspects for cardiovascular devices. We have efforts with Canada, the Regulatory Cooperation Council with Canada, RCC. We participate in projects with WHO and PAHO. And then, of course, we also set up separate meetings to make some strides in particular areas. So, for example, we have multilateral efforts with a number of regulators, and we call those meetings on a monthly basis, the digital health think tank meetings. We also have monthly international medical device safety meetings with a number of regulators where we share post-market safety information. And those are just some of the efforts that we do. And we know that to be able to really have success in working together globally, we really need to build confidence and trust amongst all of us as regulators. Next slide. So from a CDRH perspective, we certainly try to keep these efforts in mind of international harmonization. We try to best use international consensus standards throughout our pre-market and post-market processes. We tried to really think about country-specific deviations and minimize those if possible. So, for example, we recently issued a proposed rule moving our quality system regulation to the use of ISO 13485. And as we developed that particular piece of legislation, we ensured that we thought about how do we minimize country-specific deviations and really tried to keep it at a minimum of accepting 1345 with just a few deviations that were really necessary to fit into our regulatory framework. We also look at implementing IMDRF documents into our framework, and the principles that are developed there you'll often see are very much in alignment with many of the FDA guidance documents that we issue. We participate in international programs like MDSAP. We always consider least burdensome principles. And finally, the most exciting news is that we have additional staff that are now dedicated to international harmonization activities through our medical device user fee amendment commitments, and I'll touch upon those as well. Next slide, please. So through our user fee negotiations, we agreed to 5 broad commitments, and I have them listed here, and I'll go into them in a little bit more detail. But those include things like expanding engagement in international activities and showing our commitment to implementation of documents from IMDRF, for example. Looking at ways we may be able to do more outreach and capacity building efforts, and ways that we can communicate better with our regulatory partners as well as our key stakeholders. In addition to those commitments, we also were required to issue a strategic plan that outlines additional details and timelines on how we are going to achieve those particular goals. And I'm proud to say, next slide, that we just actually issued that plan towards the end of September. So on September 19th, we issued our draft International Harmonization Strategic Plan. If you've had a chance to look through that, it really recognizes the importance of globally harmonized medical device regulatory policy and practices, and really builds upon and talks about the work that we've done for many, many years at the center and how we may be able to expand that work. It also commits to publishing an annual assessment of how we're going to meet those international harmonization activities, and looks really forward how we can improve our approach to those harmonization activities. Next slide. And so just to highlight, there are 5 strategies that are tied to those key commitments, as I mentioned. And each strategy, we will be reporting out on an annual basis what activities we've done for each of those, including increasing our engagement further than what we already have had engagement in those various organizations and projects. Looking at different ways in which we can share best practices with our regulatory trusted partners, how we implemented documents, how we may be able to create a forum to engage with key stakeholders. As Nicole mentioned, we can't do this just regulators. We have to do this with all of our key stakeholders involved so that we can really be able to push these particular issues forward. And finally, being able to really participate in more outreach activities and capacity building efforts as well. So we certainly look forward to your review and comments on this particular plan. And with that, that is the end of my presentation. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Melissa. Really appreciate that. I hope you can hear the applause.
Thanks.
All right, up to Anvisa, Brazil. Would you like to do your 5 minutes?
Right, thank you. Thank you, Nicole. So if we can have the slides.
They're coming right up.
Well, while we have the slides, so Anvisa, as I mentioned, is responsible for the pre-market authorization of medical devices. And the topic of regulatory convergence is getting more and more important for the agency. And we are putting a lot of effort in this field. So if we can have the next slide, please. Then this slide is just to show you how important it could be, because the Brazilian market for medical devices, we have more than 86,000 licenses, active licenses in this year, and the majority of those products are imported. So 68%, around 68% of those products are imported for Brazil. Next, please. And in this, considering this number of products that we have available in the market, we have, in the last 10 years, we have put in place so many new regulations, trying to make a better regulation, trying to make a better access for the population on this kind of medical devices. So last year, we have this new regulation, RDC 751, which is one of the main regulations for the pre-market authorization of medical devices, actually aligning most of those requirements with IMDRF, which Anvisa is part of. Next, please. So then, regulatory convergence. So those are the key factors and motivations that we consider to work. So we have to consider the complexity of the medical device sector, predictability for the market, capacity and confidence building among different regulators. We also are interested in avoid duplication of efforts, not only for regulators, but also for the industry. Then we have the globalization of supply chains, and at the end, to accelerate patient access to new technologies and have the patient safety and public health. So this, in this slide, we have all the initiatives that we have in place in terms of implementation of IMDRF documents. So Anvisa is part of IMDRF since its foundation, and we have all those regulations already in place. So next, please. Then now, regarding reliance, so we have started a reliance mechanism for pre-market authorization. We have now a public consultation in place. So we consider that reliance based on WHO definition, that is an important pathway to have a better, a faster authorization for products, and considering our limitations in terms of human resources, in terms of expertise, including. So next, please. So based on this, we have a structured regulation on reliance, and it allows us to have a pathway for a bridget review process. And now we have this normative instruction for medical devices and IVDs, that is under public consultation. So if you're interested, you can access this document using this QR code. And this will be available for comments until 25 October. So with this, the strategy on this is to use the product registration certificates from equivalent foreign regulatory authorities that will be used as a trigger for an expedited review, right? So next one, please. So just to give you a highlight on this, conditions that will apply, we have to have an agreement on the exchange of confidential information with the foreign equivalent regulatory authorities. This would be applicable for Class 3 and Class 4 products. And the product that would be submitted under this program should be essentially the same for both markets. So same intended use and indications for use, same manufacturing sites and legal manufacturer, at the end, same regulatory version, right? And of course, there are some requirements, local requirements that should be considered. So Brazilian labeling and specific certification requirements must be fulfilled. And Visa may choose to perform the full assessment of the technical dossier if we consider necessary. And Anvisa may request clarification regarding the documents submitted for review to the regulatory authority that we are relying on. So basically, this is the approach that we have for the Reliance program, and we consider that this would be a very important regulation, since we would be able to work on capacity building, avoid duplication of efforts, and at the end, we have a faster access for the product, for the market, for the population, for new technologies, right? Thank you.
And we'll reserve, in the interest of time, reserve those questions if you have specific ones, either for after the session or when we have the open questions. I also wanted to let you know, and I was remiss in saying earlier, they have graciously said that their slides will be made available. They're comfortable with that afterwards, so you can all have those key details, especially because we know time is limited and they're going through things quickly, so that you can review them afterwards. Okay, Sally, I'd like to offer you the chance to do your presentation.
Thanks, Nicole. I only have a few slides. So I just wanted to take the opportunity while here with you to give a few different brief updates on some of the work we're doing in Canada.
No problem.
Or I'll do Melissa's presentation.
No, this would be Sally Prodzit.
Yeah, I will. So a couple things I wanted to talk about. We have a few different regulatory proposals we have been working on. The one most recently, thank you, you can skip a couple slides. One more, there we go, perfect. One that we have been actively working on this year is to be able to put in place a framework to be able to address future public health emergencies. During COVID, we used temporary regulatory measures, what we call interim orders in Canada. Earlier this year, we made a permanent regulatory framework for COVID devices, and shortly thereafter published proposed regulations in order to make that broader for other devices that may be used for an urgent public health need for emergencies. So we're actively working on those regulations. Next slide. Also, just a couple key draft guidances that we have been working on. We have two guidances out for public consultation right now. The first being a draft guidance on machine learning enabled medical devices. So this is focused primarily in the pre-market space, talking about kind of what we expect for what manufacturers need to demonstrate for safety and effectiveness. We have been working very closely with some of our trusted partners in this space, so you should see a lot of similarities as to information in our guidance as you might in some other jurisdictions. In particular, in addition to kind of broad pre-market requirements, we also have included in the guidance a mechanism for Health Canada to be able to pre-authorize plan changes using PCCPs. And so that is a kind of a key new milestone for us. Right now, all MLMD products that come into Canada are currently locked. And so we're very excited that we've been able to publish this draft guidance. It is out for comment, so please get your comments into us this month. Next slide. We also have another guidance out right now for consultation related to medical device application types. So this is related to kind of helping manufacturers determine what type of license they might need and whether certain products go together on a license or not. Sometimes it can be a little bit complex, so we've taken the opportunity to update the guidance with some current thinking. That's also out for consultation. Next slide. Oh, we missed one. Something that we're actively working on that should be coming out relatively soon for public consultation is another one of our kind of key guidances on significant change. So this has to do with when would you be triggered to be able to be required to submit a new license application to Health Canada for Class 3 and 4 products. So this guidance will replace our existing guidance on the interpretation of significant change. We've added a number of new examples and clarified kind of current thinking for significant change, and in particular have also included the example, or will be including an example around MLMD products using PCCPs and clarifying that that would not be considered a significant change. And so this is the key kind of enabler for us to be able to manage adaptive machine-enabled medical devices in our system, and so that is partly why we are ensuring that both of these guidances are coming out around the same time. Next slide. So Melissa talked earlier about a number of the different initiatives that FDA is involved in, and from a Canadian perspective, we are involved in many of those as well. Coming off of the IMDRF meeting, which is a key priority for us to be able to advanced discussions both in our participation in working groups and co-chairing or multiple working groups, as well as in advancing conversations through management committee discussions. One of the other areas that we are actively focused on is being able to participate in the eStar program. So that's a very exciting initiative for us. This year we have been piloting 2 pilots, one joint with our partners at the FDA and also a Health Canada kind of only pilot program. So both of those are actively underway, and we're really looking forward to kind of getting the results out of those in order to continue to look forward to be able to expand ESAR both for us, and there's active conversation around being able to bring in other jurisdictions to be able to ultimately continue to leverage the table of contents format and try to make it easier for industry to be able to be submitting to multiple jurisdictions with relatively consistent information. That's it for me.
Thank you. Now on to the update from Japan.
Thank you. Slides, please. So PMDA is a Japanese regulatory agency working with Ministry of Health, Labor and Welfare. So PMDA conducts actual technical reviews and audits things, and MHW conducts more administrative work. So today I would like to talk a little bit about some observation about the regulatory harmonization and reliance, as well as I would like to introduce some PMDA's effort for regulatory harmonizations. Next slide, please. Oh, sorry. 2 slides back. Oh, yes, this one. Thank you. So why harmonized requirements are so important? So it's because everyone knows, medical devices are great variety. And to understand products in the same way, we need a common language, I think. So utilizing same common language, we can understand products in the same directions among the stakeholders around the world, I think. So I think harmonized requirements is like a music score. So people have different voices, and maybe people have different instruments in different countries. But having the same music score, music can be played, and we can create harmony. So that's harmonized requirements are also important. So next slide, please. And ICMRA, which stands for International Coalition of Medicines Regulatory Authorities, published statement for global medicines regulators on the value of regulatory reliance in November 2020, very in the middle of the COVID-19 pandemic. And in that statement, you can just read full text via the QR code from here. And it says that ICMRA recognized that each NRA will decide the levels and approaches of reliance suitable for their context, and that the adoption of regulatory reliance must follow overarching principles. And this principle includes sovereignty of decisions and transparency of processes and standards, consistency of products and practices, and legality of procedure and mandates at national levels, and competency of all stakeholders involved in university. So this describes the reliance very much clearly. And it also says that they should not replace the importance of continuously developing expertise within NRAs. Next slide, please. And it also stated that ICMRA calls on NRAs to continuously assess regulatory capacities to establish clear and transparent decision-making processes, and participate in international harmonization and regulatory convergence to engage with the development of international regulatory collaboration and cooperation, to share information, their practices to strengthen regulatory capacity with other NRAs to seek adoption of reliance mechanism. And it also says that these initiatives work to build robust and efficient regulatory system, and consequently to further develop trust. So, thank you. So I think this is some image of how we can make decision. So with harmonized regulatory framework and with recognized international standards, reviewer can develop our capacity and conduct review or audit or post-market activities. And then we can achieve clear, transparent decision-making. Next, please. I think those the elements for reliance is that the harmonized regulatory framework and recognize international standards and review building capacity. That's the very important elements for reliance. Based on such components, we can achieve harmonized decision-making. But still, decision-making should be countries its own. Next slide, please. So I'd like to introduce PMDA's effort for global harmonization. So next, please. So of course, IMDRF, it's very, we put our efforts very much into these activities. Next, please. And GHWP, we just joined this activity. Next slide, please. And international standards and activities, of course. And then PMDA also conducts lots of trainings to other countries. Next, please. APEC, and then please PMDA is Asian Training Center. Next, please. And then next, please. And next, please. And MDSAP is, I think MDSAP is kind of a review, audit harmonization initiative, so I put MDSAP here. And then lastly, next please, HBD harmonization by doing activities that Lisa mentioned in her presentations. So next slide, please. Lastly, I really want to emphasize that trust can't be built in a day. So thinking about GHTF and IMDF, it's over 30 years effort among the stakeholders. With that effort, we can achieve MDSAP initiative, MDSAP activities. And also HBD, it's harmonization by doing. Sometimes we conduct a real HBD, it stands for harmonization by drinking, but it's more fun, I think. But sorry. And it's 20 years of efforts among US and Japan regulators and industry and academia. It takes time, so, and sometimes we need patience. So what I want to say is let's keep on building trust. It takes time, but also collaborating together and for the harmonized regulatory requirements. Thank you.
I learned a few new things today. If you have harmonized by drinking, then the choir becomes even more. We start singing and we sound really good, and then we can overcome everything there. So we've just learned the punchline for today. So thank you so much for that. That was perfect. Laura, would you like to give your 5-minute update, please?
Thank you. So I just like to, the theme here is the importance of global harmonization. I just want to contextualize that a little bit with where we are and what's going on from a regulatory perspective in the UK. In terms of the size of our market, we introduced a requirement to register a couple of years ago, and we've now got about 3 million medical devices on our UK register at the moment. So if I can just slip to the next slide, please. We are in the middle of a program of updating our medical device regulations, and there are several drivers for that. The opportunity to design our own regulatory framework having come out of the EU, the Independent Medicines and Medical Devices Safety Review, which reminded us all of the importance of having rigorous systems and standards pre- and post-market and the impact of patients on patients when that goes wrong, and the rapid evolution of the sector, and the need to ensure that our regulations enable innovation. So for the UK, the position outside the EU has meant that our position in the wider world has become even more important to us. And international recognition is really important, as is our participation in harmonization initiatives like the IMDRF and recognizing MDSAP. So the MHRA has been through an awful lot of change since leaving the EU. But I think probably our vision fits very well with what colleagues have said about the mix of sovereignty and needing to make our own sovereign decisions, but doing that as far as possible, signing up to global principles and in a global context. Next slide, please. So we have a regulatory framework in place in the UK. I kind of feel I need to say that sometimes because it needs updating. It goes back to 2002, and in 2021 we undertook a substantial consultation on what aspects should be updated. And that included looking at domestic assurance, so recognizing decisions of other comparable regulators around the world. So what we're doing now is we're turning the policy that we set out in our 2022 government response to that consultation into law. And that, as someone has just said, takes time. It all takes time. We're doing that through a series of statutory instruments, but in the meantime, it is already possible to apply for a UK CA mark. We've recently doubled our capacity of approved bodies. We work through approved bodies for our conformity assessment, which is slightly different to some other structures. And what we want to do through the statutory changes, the important part of that, is to bring us much more into line with global harmonized principles. So next slide, please. Just want to say something. The UK environment places the MHRA in an exciting system of health and research and innovation. And if we take the public and charity sector alone, and health sciences spend is around 5 billion annually. And that's surpassed by industry investment in research and development. So next slide, please. So supporting innovation is really important, and taking advantage of the system we have in the UK and joining that system up is really, really important to get the most of it. So one of the ways in which we're joining that system up is via the NHS Innovation Service, and that provides free support to innovators interested in the chances of bringing their products to the UK and launching them within our health service, the NHS. Next slide, please. We're also really happy in September to have launched our Innovative Access Devices Pathway, offering support, regulatory and an access route to critical innovations that meet unmet needs. The September launch was just a small pilot phase, so we can really understand better the benefits of such a pathway, and we're looking for 8 products to identify in the first phase, and I think applications are closing at the end of the month. So next slide just gives you the pathway for the IDAP, which I think I've seen shown on other podiums this week as well. Next slide then. So whilst we are passionate about the UK perspective and what we offer from a UK, the MHRA is also really proud of our membership of the global community of regulators. I love the description of music. I think we should maybe form a band. So very happy to have been accepted onto the IMDRF Management Committee in our own right. We were there as part of the EU before, but now we're standing on our own. And this is enabling us to do some really important work, to contribute to that forum as well as to learn from it, and to spread the expertise that there is around the world, including, Sally mentioned the PCCPs, and working really important partnerships with the FDA and Health Canada on AI and machine learning guidelines. So that's really, really important. In our restructure in the UK, we have set up a partnerships function, which is very much about national and international partnerships and forming those in the new context that the MHRA has. Next slide, please. So international recognition is really important, and this is what our Chancellor said earlier in the year, that we would look for a swift approval process for the most impactful medicines and medical technologies. The MHRA has already done this now. You might have seen that for medicines. The legislation is simpler and was already in place for medicines. For medical devices, we need to think more about how we do that, and we're doing that in line with the regulatory reform that I mentioned earlier. So we're trying to do that in a timely fashion. But I think the benefits of recognition are ones that colleagues on the stage have already raised. It's the benefit for UK patients, for patients all around the world, of recognising early approvals of products that are already safely in use all around the world, reducing our workload, well, reducing industry workload by eliminating duplication of work, and the E-STAR initiative is really interesting from that perspective. But also managing regulatory resources strategically. We can't afford anymore to solve our problems independently. We need to work together, and we've got a good history of doing that. So, in conclusion, I think achieving our MHRA vision is as much about looking at our own assets as it is about working with our global partners to harmonise where we can.
Thank you so much. You can tell that a lot of effort, for those of you who have been following this work for years, these regulators have really put a lot of time and effort and really diligence into this work because they see how critical it is to promoting public health. To that end, all of these regulators are here today to promote that, but also we had IMDRF recently, just the week before last. We actually got to eat breakfast together to prepare for this session in Berlin, amongst many of the other very important tasks and work that this panel engaged in while in Berlin. And I'm going to ask Melissa, who's on the phone, to maybe start us off with, it's a just recently, we always love to give a quick update at the AdvaMed conference right after, because there's not really any outcome statements, and so you're getting it fresh from you, the regulators, directly a little bit of tidbits of what happened behind the scenes in the closed-door sessions and any updates you can share. So over to you, Melissa, if you don't mind kicking us off.
Sure, sounds great. And I'll give a summary, and then I ask my colleagues to chime in on anything I may have forgotten. So for those that were not there, the IMGRF, the first 2 days of the meeting are more open meetings, and we have on our first day a workshop that was co-sponsored by DITA and GMTA, and that focused on specialized regulatory pathways. So there was a lot of discussion surrounding areas like orphan products and humanitarian use, pediatric use, custom devices, innovative devices, and then this idea about regulatory toolboxes. And Europe, as chair, will be preparing a white paper to really summarize the outcomes and discussion points from that particular workshop. Of note, I'll go through some of the key decisions that we made during this particular meeting. One area where we've really been focusing in on is trying to expand IMGRF membership. We know for many years we've been criticized as being this club that's unattainable for folks that are trying to develop regulatory systems globally. And so we wanted to really open up our doors. So last year we actually created a new category of membership called the affiliate membership program, where regulators that may not be have fully developed systems or considering medical device regulatory systems have the opportunity to join us at IMGRF to really learn from us and learn and understand how they can implement these IMGRF documents within their regulatory framework. So we're happy to announce, and we had several countries present to us, and we did make a number of decisions. We are adding Montenegro, Cuba, Israel, Chile, and Egypt as affiliate members. That's in addition to South Africa and Taiwan, who were added in our previous meeting. We also had other countries participate and provide presentations as well as show interest, and those included India, Serbia, Ukraine, and Colombia. We also approved the African Medical Devices Forum as a regional harmonization initiative, which we're really happy to do so, allowing that whole region to be engaged in IMGRF activities. As far as working groups were concerned, we didn't have any new work item proposals or draft documents or final documents for consideration, but we did decide to close the cybersecurity working group for now. Given that they had completed their work items, we want to give jurisdictions an opportunity to be able to implement those particular documents within their respective jurisdictions. We also made some updates to the IMGRF SOPs to clarify some membership terms as well within the SOPs to make it a little clearer about what the requirements are. And finally, we talked about training quite a bit and how do we develop training programs from IMGRF. And you can see on the IMGRF website that we did have a pilot program where we did training on the adverse event terminology working group and some of their key documents. So that is up on the IMGRF website. I encourage you to take a look at that, provide comments if you have any feedback. We're trying to use that as a pilot to then model future trainings based off of that. And I think those were the key aspects covered. I'll open it to my other colleagues who were there as well at the meeting if I forgot any other key items during the IMGRF meetings.
Thank you, Melissa. Any other thoughts you wanted to share?
Right. Thank you, Nicole. So I think in terms of the IMGRF, this forum is the perfect opportunity to learn how to sing in the right tone. So, and this is one of the main important regulators forum that we have, and for Anvisa especially, we, as considering the delimitation of resources that we have, all those documents that are issued by IMGRF, we try more and more to put in place in our regulation. And this is something that helps us not only to make a better regulation, but also help the local industry to have access to other markets, since we have similar requirements for regulatory purposes, right? So in this context, this Reliance program that we are trying to put in place is important not only for the access of products, of new technologies for our population, but also at the end of the day also helps the national industry to get new markets as well, right?
Thank you. That's really helpful. Any other thoughts? It's important. Other additional updates? Okay. All right, well, maybe we will turn to our Q&A part of the session. So start thinking of your questions. I'm going to start with some here first. Of the panelists, what do you think maybe is the biggest opportunity? I mean, obviously, this is really important work. Any thoughts from your perspective on the biggest opportunities here?
Right. So, as I mentioned, so once you have a common regulation, a common way of doing the registration of products, the pre-market approval, the post-market vigilance, all those requirements, regulatory requirements, we can have a capacity building between regulators, and sharing experiences then is one of the chances to have a better development of our regulations. So I think this is the main opportunity of IMDRF, or the regulatory convergence that we are trying to put in place among all those regulators. Yeah.
Other thoughts? How about the challenges? What are the biggest challenges? Any thoughts on that?
I can start on that one. So I think one of the challenges that we face is ensuring that we are providing kind of consistent documents from an international perspective, where we are looking at kind of one document globally that outlines kind of expectations. I think there are some challenges sometimes and confusion, and we have heard this from, in some cases, industry as well as kind of smaller markets in particular, when there are multiple documents kind of on an international stage that speak to the same topic but may have slight kind of some differences here and there. And so I think that is one challenge that we face, that ensuring that we have documents that have open and transparent consultation, and being able to demonstrate that at an international and global level, we have one document speaking to kind of one specific topic, and not have necessarily kind of divergent or slightly different documents, because that becomes ultimately very confusing for smaller markets to be able to kind of determine what to look at.
And if I could just comment here too, it is one of the key discussion points that we also discussed in IMDRF, is really how do we ensure alignment and harmonization across multiple organizations, and how do we work together as various organizations, because we are hearing that feedback, and we do have concerns. Many of the management committee members in IMDRF do have concerns about some of these divergent efforts, and so we are trying to tackle some of that within IMDRF, because again, IMDRF we view as the leader in developing many of these documents and key documents. So we are trying to really think about how we can better collaborate with other organizations as well.
To solve such challenges, IMDRF is now making a really good effort to create training materials right now. So we've just published the pilot training materials for adverse event terminology utilization on the IMDRF website, so you can see and access to that material.
Yeah, I think this is a key development, something that has been, we've been discussing for many years now, being able to get the word out from the IMDRF documents from those experts that develop them themselves, and to ensure that training across the world in all jurisdictions can be understood in the same way. And that's key to making sure that the work that you're doing in IMDRF has full access across the globe. So thanks for that. And that's a really important initiative and development. So thank you. Anything else from the challenges perspective?
I think one of the issues that struck me actually in Berlin is actually resourcing the way in which we do this work, because I think there are, it's great to see the expansion of membership and more countries coming in, but some of those were quite small, And it's actually making sure that we remain in that position where we move towards that expansion and that harmonization, but at the same time take account of the fact that some of the members that are coming in now have less resources to spend on that, and that's actually why their membership is really, really important. So I think that's another challenge.
I'm glad that that's being acknowledged and discussed openly, because that is something for it to work, to be able to do that, to think through how do you actually help support those other jurisdictions through that, who want to do this work. Really important. So to that end, we have lots of stakeholders here. How do we help support? How do we get involved to help you on this important work? Obviously, we know there's a lot that needs to be done, jurisdiction to jurisdiction, regulator to regulator, but we have folks from academic institutions, researchers, industry innovators who really believe in this work as well, because they see it, as we talked about before, as really the key to promoting public health globally. Are there thoughts that you can share with this audience of how we might be able to support this effort too?
I think having your voice is really important for us regulators, because so the people developing medical devices or medical products, or people who is using that products, or patients, they are most close to that product. So we need your voice, and sometimes we regulator needs to focusing on other issues, but in such a time, but still, if every stakeholder gives us your voices, we can move on with this collaboration. So.
I'd agree with that, and I think it was really helpful to get, as we did in Berlin, suggestions of areas where guidelines on harmonization would be really, really useful, and setting up working group. That's great for us to get that steer, so we can think about that.
Other thoughts? One of the things that I thought was many of us remarked that during the time of the pandemic and responses, we saw some amazing collaborative work across regulators in service of patients. And we saw not only across regulators, but industry innovators, we were all in it together. And we had to break down those barriers, and we saw it in practice really work. How do we continue that forward, or how have you seen that those learnings during COVID-19 and the response to that carry forward, and what can we continue to push forward?
I think one of the phrases that I always carry from the pandemic was the WHO director, when he said, no one's safe until everyone's safe. And that just really told us that you can't tackle something as big as that on your own, and you have to work across international boundaries, and that was really important. And I think sort of continuing to do that, it's something that it's important that we don't forget. And I think it's interesting, I think we're all now learning from that and doing our own pandemic preparedness initiatives, and it'd be useful to compare notes on those sorts of things. But it was about sharing information, which can be challenging. There was sort of some barriers went down, and some of them have gone slightly back up again, and we need to think about sharing information, because I think that's really important from a perspective of post-market and patient safety, and making sure we understand what's happening with the devices on our markets all across the world. I think we had a sense of shared priority in the pandemic as well. So I think sharing that, again, the WHO has set out some clear priorities for diagnostics, and really understanding how we can work together to meet those is really important. But I think it just demonstrated the power of coming together, and that we can't afford to stand on our own and think we can do it on our own.
I think that during the pandemic, we have seen a lot of effort of all regulators sharing not only information, but also requirements for the approval of products in an emergency use. So this was something that was very important and was done, I would say, in a very all doing together, right? So, and at the end, we have the chance to have products, safe products available to face the pandemic. And after that, I think we have a different situation now. So more engagement of regulators, small regulators are taking part of IMDRF and discussing with all of us to have a better regulation for medical devices.
And just to further on those comments, as I mentioned, a lot of these collaborations take building trust and confidence. And I think while we had a lot of that established prior to COVID, it just built further trust and confidence amongst the regulatory authorities. And we have certainly looked at different ways of being able to continue these conversations. I talked about the different initiatives. We now have monthly post-market safety calls where all of my colleagues on the stage, we all have representatives, as well as other countries, other trusted partners that we have confidentiality agreements with, where we share information on different post-market activities. Then we're trying to see how we may be able to do this as well in specific topic areas, for example. And you see us evolving and doing a lot of these same conversations in the digital health space, because we are certainly all grappling with how to handle these evolving technologies. So you are seeing spin-offs that have come out of COVID, and I think COVID really helped us show that we can come together quickly, that we all have trust and confidence in each other, and we can have these conversations and be able to share information to make unified decisions as well.
Thanks, Melissa. I really appreciate that. I see some folks lining up for questions, so maybe we'll take some audience questions. If you could please clearly state your name and your affiliation, that would be really helpful. And maybe we'll start over here.
Thanks, everyone. And first of all, thanks so much for being at the panel. And thank you for all the work that you're doing. This is definitely very helpful for all of the stakeholders. My name is Divya Raman. I lead the MDR program, the EU MDR program at Teleflex. And so I've kind of lived firsthand the challenges with, even not just new regulations, but just changing regulatory frameworks within a country. What are some of the efforts that are being taken for either countries that are becoming newly regulated or thinking about making large changes to their regulatory system to encourage them more towards IMDRF type of principles or other existing frameworks?
I could start and others could chime in. Certainly you heard us talk about the affiliate membership program. Really, a lot of the intention of that is to bring these regulators who may be developing the regulatory systems to come to the table to learn. One of the key aspects we heard from them is that they want to be able to learn and understand IMDRF documents, how they can implement them in their jurisdiction. And with respect to, jurisdictions that may be doing significant changes, a lot of times that may be a well-developed regulator, one of the management committee members at IMDRF, and certainly we do have conversations about that as well to ensure how much we can align ourselves. But some of the other efforts we're doing, for example, from a US FDA perspective, as I mentioned, we are certainly expanding capacity building efforts. We are trying to work closely in certain regions, whether it's our Latin America region and our offices there, with countries that are developing regulatory systems to ensure that they are in alignment with IMDRF. We often partner with our other partners in the region, for example, in Visa and US FDA. We've done numerous types of webinars for developing countries to really get them towards alignment of IMDRF documents, international best practices and standards. We're also doing some work in the Africa region, and many of our partners in IMDRF are helping out with that. We are doing capacity building. We're trying to work with the African Medical Devices Forum. Anvisa has helped out, HSA in Singapore, ourselves. So many IMDRF members are stepping up to ensure that as we are doing some of those capacity building efforts, we're trying to ensure that they understand what these documents are and how they can implement them within their respective jurisdictions. And I'll let others comment as well.
Thank you, Melissa. Any other thoughts?
Yes, just to complement this is because I think that each regulator that is part of IMDRF are able to try to engage some other regulators from their regions. So in the South America, we're trying more and more to get our colleagues from Mercosur and from other jurisdictions that could be taking part or at least could be using IMDRF documents. So I think that we are able to do a good job on this.
It's great. Thank you for your leadership. Next question I'll take from this side, please. Please share your name.
Yeah, this is Manan Hati from Stryker. First of all, thank you for a wonderful panel. Really enjoyed all the talks. But two questions really, one for Augusto and one for Sally. So in terms of Anvisa's recognition and reliance that you talked about, we've seen yesterday there was a PCCP session. I know Japan has IDA 10 and Health Canada has a PCCP guidance too. So in future, we expect to see more devices, hopefully, with PCCP approved. So how did that play into the recognition and reliance, and would that also be folded into it? And then for Sally, I'm excited to see the significant change guidance coming out. My particular interest is digital health, so just wanted to get a perspective on would software changes, there are different considerations for software changes, so would that be a part of the same guidance or dealt separately? Thank you very much.
Right. Thank you for your question. So regarding, well, Anvisa is just starting the reliance process, and I think that we have a lot to learn yet, but we are putting a lot of effort on this. And PCCPs is a fantastic tool that is in place for just a few jurisdictions, but we are also very interested on this, and we intend to learn with the experiences of FDA and some others on trying to implement the same kind of regulation for Anvisa as well.
Yeah, so just specific to significant change guidance, there's definitely software considerations within the guidance. So it's intended to be a broad kind of any type of product within class 3 and 4 realms. So you will see examples related to software, and as I mentioned, specifically speaking to PCCPs and clarifying that things within that envelope would not be considered a significant change.
Hi. I'm Craig Coombs with Coombs Medical Device Consulting. I've been doing regulatory affairs now for 34 years, and I have to just applaud the work that you folks are doing. I can't believe how fast and how competently you're pulling this together. It's extremely impressive. You had mentioned that your goals are to try to develop, a sense of harmonized standards, so we don't have to have different information requirements for different jurisdictions to a great extent. So what I'm asking about is, that's great, but then just to take it the next step, which wasn't discussed here, is a goal of many to have a single application where we file with one jurisdiction, and then that jurisdiction's approval is recognized by the other jurisdictions. Unless I missed it, I didn't see that as any of the goals that are out there, or is there a pathway to that, or do we just have to see how well we can do this step and then talk about that next step of a single application? In general, where does the group, what's your gestalt on how that is going to come about, if at all?
Does anybody want to start?
I guess I'll start with that one.
Melissa, you want to start? And then Sally's saying he'll back you up after.
Perfect. Sounds great. So certainly, you did hear us probably in the past talk about you ultimately getting to that goal. And we have done a lot of groundwork for that and foundational work. Within the context of IMDRF, for example, in the IMDRF Good Regulatory Review Practices Working Group, we've issued a series of documents that would help support a single application. We are doing work in the regulated product submission with respect to eStar, for example, doing work both in IMDRF as well as bilaterally, and it will be multilaterally as well. For example, implementing eStar within both doing a pilot with Health Canada and the US to really see how this would work for applications. Anvisa would likely be the next country added to that. So we are trying to do steps, recognizing the fact that pre-market review is quite different globally. It's not as harmonized as post-market areas were. So MDSAP, while challenging to develop, presented less challenges than it does from a pre-market perspective. Mm-hmm. We're working with different classification schemes amongst jurisdictions, FDA, I know, has a unique 3-tier classification system. And we also have our 510K paradigm. And for us, that is quite the challenge to be able to align up internationally when we're based on substantial equivalence and not safety and performance. So each respective jurisdiction does have to go back. We had a lot of conversations about it, but we do have to go back and figure out what laws may need to change in our respective jurisdictions to help accommodate a future single review program. And we are all thinking about that right now. In the US, we certainly are trying to think about proposals to change that paradigm. You've heard us talk about different pathways to establish safety and performance so that we are better aligned globally, so that when we go forward and try to pursue such type of program, we have the ability to do so and are lined up more globally. So I would say, you know, we have done a lot of work. It just takes time. There's a lot of building blocks that have been established, and just more work to come, and respective jurisdictions are thinking about legally how can they fit that into the regulatory framework. Sally, I'll let you comment further.
Yeah, so I would just echo what Melissa said. So it is definitely something we are looking to the horizon for kind of an MDSRP program, but we are really still in kind of that building block mode. But it is definitely something that we kind of look at, recognizing at the end of the day, you know, submissions are getting more complex, they're requiring more resources, and we don't have more money, at least I know from a Canadian perspective, we don't have more money to be able to necessarily get a number of more people. So we also recognize it, you know, from an efficiency as well as access to products perspective, as a great kind of future initiative that we need to continue to build forward through INDRF and through our continued kind of work through trusted partnerships.
Perfect. Thank you.
Am I on? Yeah, I think from our perspective, we're watching this with interest. I think we're probably further back in the development process, and our first step is probably our international recognition, particularly around thinking about the FDA. And as we do that, we will learn more about where the differences are. But I think it has to be something that we're all looking to at the future. We talked about alignment and efficiency and all of those sort of things, and I think that has to be the goal. It's what the steps are and the pace that I think is probably needs fleshing out.
I just would like to say that I think this is the biggest goal that we have under IMDRF probably, is to have something that we could share the same applications, the same requirements, and to have just one review or one approval for all jurisdictions. But of course, as Melissa mentioned, it will take some time, right? So.
I do want to just put forward that eStar is a step to single submission, which is one step there. So continuing on that pathway, those are practical ways to get us there, to start to understand the similarities. And the more the pilot goes through, we understand that that's the next step. And I applaud you for taking that next step, because it is tangible ways to get there. Diane, I'll go to this side, and then I'll get to you, Scott.
Diane Johnson, Johnson & Johnson, no relationship. I wanted to ask about regulatory sandboxes. Health Canada had one several years ago, and it was related to AI software and what a regulatory approach could look like. And then they, time went forward and they issued the draft guidance on AI medical devices, including change protocols. And you could really see the output. It was a very nice balance of information without being overly prescriptive. And I think, are there discussions within IMDRF about expanding the use of regulatory sandboxes? Because from my personal participation in that activity, it seemed like it worked out really well.
Do you want to share first what a regulatory sandbox is for others who might not know, and then maybe take it from there?
So I can maybe start. So I think there are a number of different definitions of regulatory sandboxes. Interestingly, for those who were at IMDRF, or maybe those who weren't, there was specific topics, I can't remember if it was on the Monday or the Tuesday, around regulatory sandboxes. And what struck me is that in general, regulatory sandboxes are intended to be able to be kind of a safe space to be able to kind of develop either regulations or kind of guidelines around product areas, but that can mean a lot of different things to different people. So from a Canadian perspective, our kind of regulatory sandbox building off of kind of financial models, and that's often where people have talked about regulatory sandboxes in the past before kind of having it come to the medical device space. It's what we call our Advanced Therapeutic Products Pathway. So it is something that is live in our legislation to be able to create tailored requirements for a product area. For us, it's specifically bound to drugs or devices or combinations thereof that truly don't fit in our regulations. And so, adaptive MLMD was an area one of the first areas we looked at, recognizing our challenges with our significant change regulations within our MDR, and that we really had no way to get kind of past that. And so we were looking to create a sandbox where we could oversee and create tailored requirements to get around that. What ultimately happened for us through the work that we have done over the last few years while working on that sandbox and working with our partners and the ability to be able to recognize PCCPs and what that means, we were able to actually figure out how to regulate those products within our regulations. And so we didn't ultimately end up using the sandbox that we were working towards, kind of thinking we would need to do. But ultimately it did enable us at the end of the day to be able to figure out how to regulate the products, which is ultimately the goal. So I don't know if others have kind of other sandbox type examples or...
I think we are also, we took part in that, it was a Monday, wasn't it, in Berlin, and I think we're thinking about it. The sandboxes are really important for asking regulatory questions, answering regulatory questions, rather than necessarily a pathway coming out of them. And I think particularly suitable around the areas of some of the particular questions around AI, around the human in the loop interface, getting the evidence, the way the AI changes. So that's the area that we're thinking in the UK about how we could use regulatory sandboxes for that. But I think they're very, very important where you look at a product and the regulatory framework you have, there isn't an obvious pathway, and whether they turn into something then that becomes more permanent, they may not. They may just answer that question, and as Sally said, make you realize you can then actually do it with your existing framework.
We're nearing the time, so we have two last questions. Scott first, and then to you, Sabi.
Good morning. Thank you. Scott Colburn from FDA. I'm actually going to ask my question from my other hat as chair of ISO TC 210. Many of you spoke about international standards. Many of you used the word recognition. So from a collective you of regulators, what does that word mean? And how could standards developers, where we have a strong partnership with industry and through the liaison roles with IMDRF and GHWP, the ability to work together, how could we improve standards in a way to have those foundational tools to be of more importance and optimize their use for regulatory purposes?
Well, I think that standards are always important for medical devices regulation, and of course all standards would be applicable for so medical devices. They are built based on experience of the industry, right? And the regulators should be, my understanding, should be part of this building of those documents, of those standards. And we are trying, since we had this standards working group in IMDRF, we are trying to discuss the engagement of all regulators to be part, at least to have a look on the meetings of the ISO, IEC, and some others, to make them also to make them to be able to be used in our regulation, in our building of requirements. So I think that the engagement of all regulators in these initiatives, in these standards developing organizations are essential, right?
Thank you for that. Go ahead, Melissa.
I was just going to say, to further Augusto's comments, agree, one key is getting regulators at the table and getting them engaged in the standards development process, which we are trying to do through IMDRF and our liaison relationships. But the second is from a standards developer perspective, to ensure that when standards are being developed, that they really think about how to put clear criteria together. One particular area of interest is certainly like the essential principles of safety and performance, for example, where you, in many cases, many regulators are using standards to help meet those particular essential principles. So really trying to think about from a regulatory perspective of how can we use these standards to be able to help meet those regulatory requirements, and when they are developed, that they are developed with the regulator in mind as well.
Much. That seems like some real low-hanging fruit that we can look at, and how do we utilize that at the global perspective. Okay, Sabi, please finish us off with a great question at the end.
Well, thank you, Nicole and panelists. A very informative session. We had some very good sessions yesterday about AI, PCCP, all of those have been mentioned, but I have a particular question and interest in software and AI. So we're all looking at the EU AI Act, potential complete, comprehensive legislative sort of framework for everything AI related, and has potential to really impact how medical devices are developed. So realize that that particular regulatory body is not represented here, but it will have impact on all of these regions. So any comments on how that act is proposed and the impact on the individual work streams? For example, FDA has been very active in putting in place PCCP, but the AI Act will have some implications. So any commentary on that?
Have you all thought through that yet?
I could just comment more generally in the fact on my slides I mentioned all of the different activities we have, and I mentioned digital health think tank meetings. One of the particular topics is AI of interest there. The European Commission is actually involved in these conversations amongst a number of our close partners. So we are having some of these conversations about how to align up as best as we can. Certainly we know what's happening in Europe has implications. So there are closed-door conversations ongoing with a number of us behind the scenes in those digital health types of discussions.
So, Laura.
So I think it's similar. There's a broader appetite to regulate AI, and I think it's really important. I mean, one of the first things that we're finding we're having in our conversations is AI as a medical device is already regulated, and so really understanding how that interacts with the broader desire to regulate AI, and that we don't end up either having a big gap or having an overlap that's too difficult to manage. But I think it's actually positive that the broader world of AI is becoming regulated, because I know a lot of the stuff we see is actually not a medical device, and similarly we see stuff that's out there that is, and it's actually really working out where that borderline is, and where our regulations sit and where the broader regulations sit. But as Melissa says, these are active conversations that we're all seeing the risk and opportunities here that we're involved in.
And I think one of the things that's we can take note of is in the UK, they have that governing council that's looking across different agencies in the government who are looking at these same questions and seeing how do they harmonize within each other, which is also like a best practice that many jurisdictions can look to. And then how do we actually take that to the global space and learn from each other? So I want to thank this group. They're excellent. They have devoted their time and their lives to this work in service of patients. So help me in thanking them for today. And thanks for joining.